What's up everyone? In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create your own dynamic dashboard in Excel that can impress your bosses and colleagues. In this worksheet here, I have a range of cells that contains refund check data. Column A is the date the refund check was entered. Column B is the client that we're sending the money back to. Column C is the state the client came from. For column D is the invoice number that the refund check will have. For column E is the refund type, ergo is it an overpayment on an invoice, a duplicate payment on an invoice. And column F is the amount that we're sending back to the client, or the refund money. And this range of cells has about 3,500 rows of data, and we'll be using the data here to create the dynamic dashboard, which you can see in the result worksheet here. Let's go over what this dynamic dashboard can do before we go over the steps to making one. I have this three charts here: top 10 clients with the most refund, dollars and millions; top 10 states with the most refunds, again dollars and millions; and a count of the refund type breakdown by for the retainer, cost refund, duplicates, vendors, and overpayments. And this dashboard has three pivot slicers here to filter out for certain data, and a timeline slicer here to filter out based on certain date range, which you can do by years, quarters, months, or days. Now, when I try to filter for one slicer here, it's gonna affect all the charts here. So let's say that I wanted to filter for Alice Johnson. If I click on this, the three charts changed at the same time. Now it's gonna show how much money Alice Johnson received, the state that Alice Johnson is from, which is Alabama here, and a breakdown of the refund types for Alice Johnson specifically. If I wanted to do more than one client, I can do a control click. I can click on this and then do a control click and click on Bob Lawrence. And now we have two clients this time. I can clear the filter here by clicking on this clear filter button. And if we want to do filter by state instead, we can click on any of these buttons here. I'm going to click on like Florida, and we get a breakdown for the state of Florida. And if I wanted to break it down even more by refund types, I can click on duplicates here, and I can do a control click on overpayments. So I get a breakdown of the refund data for clients in Florida. Only these two clients are available, and the refund type when we selected Florida as a state. So I'm gonna clear all the filters in the slicer here. And if you wanted to filter by the timeline, I can just like click. If we want to filter by months, I can click on January 2023 here. And it's gonna show me all the data for January 2023 instead. Now this might look a bit off. So if something like this happens, you can do a right click and you can just say refresh data, and it should like fix that up. And if you want to select a range of date, you can hold on to this cursor and then just drag to whatever date you want to end at. In this case, from January 2023 to like somewhere around end of January 2024. And it's going to show you the data here. So if you want to do years instead of month, I can click on this and then just select years. And I can go select either like 2015 to like 2024. Now that I've shown you what the dashboard will look like, let's actually start making it. I'm going to go to this worksheet called pivot tables, and this worksheet will contain three pivot tables that will be related to the charts that we're making. And if you want to make a pivot table, we can go to the insert tab here, click on pivot tables, and we're going to be asked to put in a table range. So I'm going to go to data and select the entire range here up to the last row. Click enter, and we get pivot table 1 here. We're going to be making three pivot tables in total. One for the client by refund total. The second table will be the state by refund total. And the last pivot table will be the count of each refund type. So let's paste the last one here. And for pivot table 1, we're just going to drag the appropriate fields. So we're going to drag the client name in rows here. And then we're going to drag the amount or the refund amount, check amount here in values. And this will show us the total refund amount by client. So I'm just going to format this as a currency to make it look neat. And the total refund amount is around $88 million for about 100 clients. In this table, we're going to drag the state header into rows. And we're going to drag the other value, check amount here. And we're going to format this as a currency. And for the last pivot table, we're just going to drag the refund type into rows. And we're going to drag the same header here into values, and it'll automatically count how many refund types there are for each header. Now that we've made the pivot tables, we can start making the charts. To make the chart, we can go to the Insert tab, and we can select one of the pivot tables, and we can click on this button here called Pivot Charts. If we do that, we get this menu here showing a list of charts we can make. Now for pivot tables, we won't have access to certain charts unless you find a way to trick Excel into like believing you can make these charts. But for our cases, we're going to use mostly the bar charts and the column charts. For the first table here, client total refund, client total refund, we're going to choose the bar chart. So I'm going to select this and click OK. And we get this chart with over like 100 clients in it. This doesn't really look nice, and it looks like very clustered, so let's make this easier to read by only selecting the top 10 clients. And if I want to select the top 10 clients, I can go to this pivot table here, click on this button here, and then we can go to value filters, and we can select the option for top 10. And we're going to do top 10 items by check amount. Click OK. And now we only get the top 10 clients by check amount. And we need to clean this up a bit more as well by removing these labels here. I'm going to do like a right click here, and I'm going to do hide all field buttons and chart. And then I'm going to delete this label here for total. And the next thing we can do is that we can remove the grid lines here by selecting one of them, right click. And we can just click on delete, and we can give these a border here, the data labels. So I'm going to give the outline as black here, and I'm going to fix the axis here, format axis, and give them, we'll display the units by millions. And finally, we can just fix the title up here. So in the results worksheet here, we titled the top 10 clients with most refund, dollars in millions. So I'll just do the same thing with that. So in this worksheet, I'm going to do top 10 clients with most refund, dollars in millions. And we can just leave the graph like that now. And if you want to sort the bars from highest to lowest based on dollars amount, we can click on this and sort. I believe like for this scenario, smallest to largest. And it's going to sort by dollar amount instead of name now. And the last thing we can also do is that we can just delete this millions label here. We don't necessarily need it since we're referencing the dollars and millions directly here. And also, before I forget, we can just give the border for this chart as like a black outline. So I'm going to do like a right click by selecting the chart, and I'm going to go to format chart area, go to border, and do solid line with the color black. And we get the final chart looking like this now. For the last two charts, we're going to follow the same process. But for this part of the video, I'm just going to speed things up a lot until we can actually get to the part where we make the charts dynamic through pivot slices and timelines. So let's start making the second and third charts then.
A lot of boring math later.
Now that we're done making the three charts, we can start incorporating the pivot slices and timeline into each of them on the dashboard worksheet here. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to copy the first chart we made, which was the top 10 clients with the most refund. Copy this and go to the dashboard worksheet and just paste it around this region. And before I go to like the next step, I'm just going to color the whole worksheet range here as something like gray so that you don't see each of the grid lines here. And we're just going to align the first chart next to the row here as much as possible around this region. And you can see that it's a bit difficult to align them properly, and that might be based on the alignment setting you have. So if I go to format here and I go to align, we're currently at snap to shape, but what we want is snap to grid so that we can move them to the row as close as possible. And we can just leave it like that. And let's just make this chart a bit bigger. So now that we've made the first chart, let's do the same thing for the second chart, but we're going to paste it underneath this chart here. So I'm going to copy the top 10 states with most refund and just paste it here. And we're going to try to align it to the bottom of this chart here. Now for this part, you might want to change the alignment setting. You can go to Format again, go to Align, and just click on Snap to Shape so that it tries to align properly with the closest Microsoft object here, which is the chart. So if I move this around, it easily aligns with the border here, and then we can just extend this around this region easily. So we can finally do the third chart, which is the count of each refund type. So do the same thing, just copy this and paste it here in this area. And I'll just align it around this region. Now that we have the three charts here, we can start moving on to the pivot slicers and timelines. And what I'm just going to do first is that I'm just going to make this actually a bit shorter in height, and then just move these up. And we can put the pivot slicers around this region here. And the way you would do the pivot slicers is that you can click on any of the charts here, and I'm going to click on the first one, and we go to Pivot Chart Analyze, go to Insert Slicer, and you can select the slicers that you want to include. These slicers are mostly used for filtering the data that you want to see. So I'm going to select client name, date, and refund type. And we get these three pivot slicers, and we're just going to try to align them to this area here. So I'll put the client name around this region and just extend this down. And the next thing will be the state. And finally, the refund type. So let's test one of the slicers out. I'm just going to zoom out a bit, and I'm going to test the slicer out for client name, and let's see what happens. So I'm going to choose the random client name. Let's choose Kevin Bennett. And when I do that, this slicer changed automatically, and the rest of the slicers also changed along with the filter data here. But you'll notice that these two pivot charts didn't change at all, and that's because we have to do something in order for all the charts to be connected to each other. So I'm just gonna do a right click here in one of those slicers and go to Report Connections. And what you do is that when you click on Report Connections, this menu will pop up, and you want to check mark all the pivot tables here. And you want to do the same thing for these two slicers, and we can see that the charts dynamically changed based on the first pivot slicers here, which includes only the client name, Kevin Bennett. I'm going to do the same thing for the state here. Report Connections, and check mark these two boxes and click OK. And do the same thing for the last one. Report Connections and check mark these two. And now we have all the pivot charts all connected to each other. So when you try to filter for one data or multiple datas, all the charts will change at the same time. Now, what if we tried clearing the filter from the client name? Well, if we click on this clear filter button here, we get something like this monstrosity here. And that's because when you clear the filter in this for client name, and if we go back to pivot tables, it basically resetted the pivot table filter data where we were trying to filter for like the top 10 values only. The filter in the pivot table and the pivot slicers filter in the charts are also like all connected to each other. So you would have to find a way to fix that. So if we were to like clear the filter, then the top 10 filter would also get cleared at the same time. And if we want to fix that, what we can do is that we can go back to the pivot table and where we're doing the top 10 values, and we can do a right click, go to pivot table options, go to total and filters, and checkmark the box allow multiple filters per field, and click OK. And then you just want to go back to doing the top 10 values here. So click on this button here and then do value filters and select top 10 and click OK. And we get back the top 10 values again. So if we go back to the dashboard, we select a client and then we clear the filter. The filter doesn't get resetted from the top 10 filter doesn't get resetted from the pivot table. So all these values here stay in place now when we clear the filters. And we're gonna do the same thing for state filters. So I'll go back to this table, do a right click on the state pivot table, go to pivot table options, totals and filters, and checkmark the allow multiple filters per field and click OK. And And it'll do the same thing for this chart that we did here. We don't really have to do the same thing for the refund type breakdown since we don't have a whole bunch of data that we're filtering by. Now that we're done making the pivot slicers, we can finally move on to creating the timeline. If we want to insert a timeline, it's exactly like inserting a slicer. I'm going to click on the first chart here, and we're going to go to Pivot Chart Analyze, and we're going to click on the Insert Timeline button here. And when you do that, we get this menu popped up where Excel is going to try to identify all the columns that are referenced to a date, and then we're going to have the option to choose the date. So in this case, I'm going to choose the date the refund was entered into our system, and click on that, uncheck mark it, and click OK. And we get this timeline here. Now, I'm gonna place the timeline right above these charts here, and I'll just add an extra row here, just to like increase the size or the height. Place the timeline in this region, and I'm just gonna go back to the formatting here, and I'm gonna click on this timeline here button here, and I'm gonna do align and align to grid or snap to grid, and just align it around this region, and then do align and snap to shape, so that when we extend this, it's gonna match the width of all the other charts. And I'll just click on the refresh button to resize this. Now we have the timeline that's connected to the first chart, and if we want to connect the timeline to the other two charts, we do the same thing as before. Right click, go to report connections, and check mark these two boxes. And now when we try to filter our timeline by date, or filter the data by date, we automatically change these at the same time. Now you'll notice that these are blank. That's because there's no data for October 2024. But if we change it to something like years, right, where there's like a bunch of data available for a year, we can select 2021, and we get all the data for 2021. So if I want to do 2021 to 2022, and I want to filter by these values here, so we can filter by like a client name, Laura Burns, and we can filter for specifically for vendor payments as well, and we get these specific data sets now, or these specific data. So I'm gonna clear the filter and just clear all the filters here, and we pretty much completed a simplistic dashboard where we incorporated the pivot timeline, the slicers, and the charts all in one worksheet. Of course, there's a lot more you can do to making the dashboard look better and easier for your stakeholders to understand. But this video is more of an overview on how you can make a dynamic dashboard in Excel with pivot tables and charts. And if you guys found that to be helpful and want to see more cool Excel related videos, then you should definitely check out this video I uploaded before, where I showcase 3 simple custom Excel functions to retrieve file data from multiple folders. As always, if you guys found this video to be helpful, then please like and comment down below what else you'd want to see. And if you haven't already, subscribe. Until then, I'll see you guys next time.